Thank you, John, and thank you everybody for making me feel so welcome. The University of the Third Age just suits me perfectly. I believe that 70 is the new 50, and since I'm almost in that category, I'm entering early middle age, and I think most of the people here are doing the same. Pam and I returned last year from a just over 4-year stint as South Africa's ambassador to Thailand, to Laos, to Cambodia, to Myanmar, which is also called Burma, and as permanent observer to the United Nations in Bangkok. They have 66 countries that are represented there, and it's a fascinating posting all round. I started wanting to be in public life when I was 8 years old. And I told my father that I was going to be a member of parliament one day. And he said, "Why do you want to be a member of parliament?" So I said, "So I can go and fight the gnats." Well, at 8 years old, I had all the wisdom politically. And I was nominated for the first time to stand in Brakpan for the Provincial Council in July 1964, which was 1 month after the end of the treason trial and 1 month after Nelson Mandela went to jail. So that's starting to be a long time ago. For almost all of the rest of that time, I've been a politician, or I was a politician, and had to be clever, had to be entertaining, had to know much more than the people who were governing the place, had to point out the corruption and the problems and everything that was wrong. I must tell you that it's much nicer being an ambassador than being an opposition politician, because being an ambassador, all you have to do is to promote your country and be positive about your country and all the wonderful things. And South Africans will know that there are many of those, and I'm going to deal with them later. I must say that when the offer came to me to accept an ambassadorship, the Director General of Foreign Affairs, as it was then, it's now the International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Saluba, he phoned me and said that the President wanted to make me an ambassador. And I said to him, "Are you sure you've got the right person? Because I think the President hates my guts." He laughed and he said, no, the President knows what he's doing and I know what I'm doing, and he wants you to consider this. Now, why I was so surprised about being offered an ambassadorship was that 9 months before that, I was the first person to be censured by Parliament. You think of all those Travelgate crooks, all the other people who've got away with murder. I'm the only person who's ever been censured by the South African Parliament for doing his job. This was a fuss second to none. There were helicopters, the press sent helicopters, they were flying overhead. They were all out taking pictures of the Mbeki retirement home. The next door neighbour called the press and put a ladder up next to the wall, so they were all climbing up and taking pics and all of that. And there, all I was on the pavement. I never put my foot in the property. I never did a thing that was wrong, I thought. And I ended up being the Mampara of the week, the red light, and even Mrs. Helen Sisman attacked me. So it shows that even Helen was wrong sometimes. Somebody else who attacked me was Mrs. Mbeki. And she said that she was going to sue me for invading her privacy in terms of the Constitution. Well, of course I hadn't, because I wasn't even on the property. So I explained that I thought she was a very nice woman whom I liked very much, but I was a lawyer. And if she decided to take me on, I was going to make a lot of money out of her, because she was going to lose. You know. The result of all of that was that the ANC got off the hook, the government got off the hook, and Gibson was the baddie. And I didn't want people to think that I had been bought or that that was the intention of the government at all, because it wasn't. And I was very careful, therefore, to make the statement, which was widely covered, and I did so in Parliament as well, to make the statement that it said a lot for President Mbeki and for Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, that they took a loyal DA person, somebody who was a strong supporter of Zille, Helen Zille, and trusted him to represent South Africa properly. And I must say that in all of the years that I was there as an ambassador, I never had to compromise on my principles in any way at all. Outside, it's so much easier to promote South Africa because we have so much to promote. It's a wonderful country with great features and great achievements and wonderful people. And it's really not that difficult to promote our country. The other thing that was difficult to get across was for them to understand the variety of colours and cultures in our country. And really it was quite amusing once. I went to one of the provinces in Thailand to go and watch one of the elimination bouts for the world bantamweight title fight, boxing fight. We pulled up outside the boxing place, and the governor and 12 of his entourage were standing on the pavement waiting to welcome me. When the car was opened for me, they looked and they decided I couldn't be the ambassador, so they ran around, the governor leading all these chaps to go and let one of my junior officials out. He was nice and black, isn't he? Some people here might be surprised to know how well regarded we are overseas. It's quite amazing how even almost 20 years later, that aura of the miracle transition still persists, particularly in the diplomatic community, but in many other, in the academic world, in political activists and so on. And so often one got asked to share those experiences and tell them about it. People admired our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Whatever local opinion was, some local opinion was about it, it's an example that many people around the world feel could be or should be emulated in their own countries. Another time I would be able to tell you all about Burma. I might say a bit just now. But what a fascinating place. And it really was a privilege seeing that all of that happen just in a question of 3 years, that it went from repression and generals to where it got by the time I left. I talked earlier about the variety of colours and cultures that make up South Africa, and that was reflected at our embassy as well. I was the only English-speaking person at our embassy, and then I had 7 other diplomats. One spoke Pedi, one spoke Zulu, one spoke Sotho, one spoke Tswana. I've got lost somewhere, but we each had a different. One spoke Afrikaans, a coloured person eventually, and so it was a United Nations right there, and a demonstration to people in Thailand and to our own rest of staff, because we had 13 or 14 Thais as well. And I found that it was necessary to deal with this culture question. Sometimes one would hear from Thais, they don't understand my culture. And I heard this one time too many, because I certainly made every effort. I only spoke Thai to the Thai people, as far as I could go. And anyway, we had a team-building exercise, and I primed my 7 diplomats and me to all stand up and to say in our own language, "You don't understand my culture." That was the last I ever heard of it, because it was a demonstration of the fact that we have to have respect for each other, irrespective of our background, our color, our culture, our language, our religion. We covered the whole spectrum, and I thought it was marvelous. My two predecessors were both black women. My successor is a colored lady, and that in itself is a reflection for the ties of what South Africa is. One of the things that created endless interest in the diplomatic community and elsewhere, also in general in Thailand, was the fact that I was a political appointee. People just couldn't understand that South Africa was sufficiently politically mature to trust an opposition politician to be an ambassador in an important posting. One after the other, people said and continued saying that it could never happen in their country. And, diplomats come and go. So you get a new lot coming from France or the United States or Australia or Bangladesh or Saudi Arabia or wherever. And then the story would have to be told again. And it was such a plus, we found, the fact that our country had sent somebody like me. It was a plus in terms of the overall image of political tolerance and being prepared to accept that all of us have a contribution to make in our country. Well, when you entertain this way, it's marvelous. The big thing is deciding on the guest list, working out the protocol, and deciding which caterers you're going to have, and seeing that everything, generally you supervise. But you go up and get dressed, and you come down and the guests all arrive at the same time. All the chauffeured cars come one after the other, and wonderful. And they all go at the same time. Everybody's chauffeured car goes, because everybody there has chauffeurs. Everybody who goes to diplomatic functions, let's put it that way. Then we would say good night to the staff and go upstairs. And when we came down in the morning, it was absolutely perfect. Not a glass, not a dish, nothing. That's the way to entertain. Unfortunately, now that we're back, we've discovered that we are still required to wash and dry the glasses. About 1994, when President Mandela was very newly the president of South Africa, and an ambulance pulled up outside Tuynhuys next to Parliament, and like wildfire, the story spread that Mandela was ill and was being taken off in hospital. Immediately, the rand dived down. The value of the rand just went to hell. It recovered soon. And Tony said, I wonder what would happen today if an ambulance pulled up at Nkandla. Do you think the rand would go that way, or do you think it would go that way? Anyway, why all of this is important is that we have friends all over the world who view us with concern. They care about us. You'd be surprised at how many people one comes across who really care about us, about our country. And they view it, everything that happens here that's negative, with concern. The Economist magazine, which is one of the most authoritative in the world, wrote recently an article about South Africa, which they headed, Cry the Beloved Country. I want to say to you that that sort of thing makes an ambassador's job very difficult. It's correct that the government is wrong on many issues and as bad on others, but I also want to point out that there's so many positives, and some of us are inclined to forget those. Millions of people have houses that they didn't have before. Millions of people have piped water and flush toilets that they didn't have before. Millions of people have houses with electricity that they didn't have before. Many, many millions of people have social grants which have lifted them out of the most abject poverty. Universities have hundreds of thousands of young people whose parents never dreamt of having a university education. Life expectancy in South Africa has now recovered, and it's back at 60. A while ago it was at 52. And we now have the biggest HIV AIDS program in the world. So I want to say to you that there are many positives about South Africa. And having been away for that period, I just know how good it looks from over there and how good it is to be here. I remain an optimist about our country. It's been 5 minutes to midnight for all of the 43 years since I was first elected. And it'll probably go on being 5 minutes to midnight for the rest of time until I become even old middle-aged. I remain optimistic, and I think that this is really the best country in the world to live in. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And that's why I've got such a huge hope and faith in the future. And being able to represent our country and all the positives was the thrill of a lifetime and something that will remain with me forever.